good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told how to voice radio. So today, I am showing you a new Meloetta card. But when I say Meloetta card, I mean Meloetta and a bunch of other stuff, notably Jigglypuff. I know, right? Yesterday we got to talk about Wigglytuff. Today, we get to talk about Jigglypuff. So, Meloetta here. It's a psychic Pokemon with 80 HP, which is very, very, very low. The one good thing I will say about it is that an Espeon's first attack will not get a KO here. You are, of course, weak to Psychic, being a psychic Pokemon, but at least you can take a Psybeam from Espeon here. So, not ideal, ladies and gentlemen, but it could be worse. Retreat cost of 1 is both low and opens up a skateboard post-rotation as free retreat, so that's quite nice. And being a psychic Pokemon means you're hitting weakness against stuff like Buzzwole, which is an incredibly good weakness to hit, because I don't think Buzzwole is going anywhere after rotation. I think it's still going to be a great deck. And obviously in Fairy Rise, these psychic Pokemon have got a couple of new tricks. So you've got the new Morty, which if you had a psychic Pokemon KO'd the previous turn, you get to grab 2 cards out of your opponent's hand and shuffle them into their deck. And we've got Spell Tag, whereby if it's attached to Meloetta or any psychic Pokemon, when they get KO'd by damage from an attack, you get to put 4 damage counters on your opponent's side of the board. So we've got some new tricks for Psychic here, which is rather nice. But what does it do? Well, first of all, 1 energy, Sing. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it does. And it's fine. It's not particularly impressive, but it's fine. It's automatic sleep. Now, the bad news is I talked about a skateboard earlier. A skateboard will actually allow you to retreat when you're asleep, which kind of sucks if you're trying to rely on sleep. And everyone's playing Guzma at the moment, which switches. And post-rotation, we're not going to have many supporter cards other than Cynthia. So Tate and Liza's probably going to see a bunch of play. And that is either a Shauna or a switch. That choice is yours. But it means your opponent has more switching options. So switching is going to be something that people are going to be able to do around it. So, I mean, look. It's kind of like Froakies Bubble. You never want to use it. But they're asleep. If they flip tails, then they're not going to be able to attack next turn. Or they could flip a heads and then they're fine. It's alright, but it's not amazing. Then we get to the main attack here, which is of course the reason Meloetta gets a video discussing it. 1 Psychic, 2 Colorless Energy, Miracle Harmony. Our translations, of course, come from the lovely David Hochmann over at limitlesstcg.com/translations. And it's a slightly complicated one, but you flip a coin for each of your Pokemon in play with the attack Sing. This attack does 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon for each heads. So let's say you've got 6 Pokemon in play with Sing. You flip 6 coins. If you hit 4 heads, you do 40 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon in play. That, ladies and gentlemen, pretty gosh darn nice. Now it is damage, not damage counters. Most of the time this isn't going to be an issue. Stuff like Machoke and Skypillar will protect from both damage and damage counters, but you do have the odd thing like Magikarp that have an ability which protects but only from damage. Unfortunately, this is damage, so Magikarp will protect. And look, if you can be spreading 4 damage counters a turn to all your opponent's Pokemon, that's amazing. Now, the reason I say 4 is because 4 will basically beat the benchmark for a lot of what we've got here. So let's say, for argument's sake, we look at a Tapu Koko. Tapu Koko, for a double colorless energy, just does a flat 20 to all your opponent's Pokemon. Now it's for 1 energy fewer, and it just does a flat 20 to everything. And there is a strong argument to make that that's the better way to go about things. We could also look at Latios, and a lot of decks at the moment that want to spread damage around, this is the conversation they have. Do we go Tapu Koko? Or do we go Latios? Latios does 30 to 2 Pokemon, whereas Tapu Koko does 20 to all of your opponent's Pokemon. And it really depends where you're going with this. I mean, I often use the example of stuff like routes, which have 60 HP. So something like a Latios combined with a Greninja, for instance, will get a 1-hit KO, whereas a Tapu Koko won't. But then again, Tapu Koko gets more damage on the field. I mean, let's say you're using something like the Tapu Lele that lets you rearrange damage counters on your opponent's side of the field, or the new Chandelure from this particular set, linked in the description. All the cards I'm talking about from the new set will be linked in the description. Well, those Pokemon really rely on having as much damage on the field as possible, so in that regard, it's generally better to have the most damage possible. And if we're looking at the most damage possible, Tapu Koko, unless they've only got 2 Pokemon out, will generally be the better call. If there's 3 Pokemon on the field, they each do 60 damage total. Pick your poison. So if you can do, say, 30 damage, and on average, if you've got 6 singers in play, you should be doing, on average, 30 damage. Then you're doing it to everyone, which is better than Latios, and you're doing 30, which is better than Tapu Koko. This becomes the best basic spreader of them all. Now, of course, the giant downside, Tapu Koko rocks up with a single energy, off to go. When single energy, I mean double colourless, but 1 attachment. Latios, basic Pokemon, rocks up with a single attachment, ready to go, whereas Meloetta rocks up with 2 attachments and 5 bench Pokemon, and you're ready to go. Now, I suppose at this point we should give a quick shout out to Victini. It lets you reflip. So if you've got 6 singers in play and you only flip 2 heads, you can use Victini to reflip, and maybe you get 3, 4, 5, 6 heads. There is a possibility here, and it's very remote. But if you can hit 6 out of 6 heads here, then all of your opponent's evolving basics, like Eevee, like Rouse, like Zorua, will all be going down in a single attack. Chances of hitting 6 out of 6 heads, even if you use Victini to have 2 goes, is honestly not that high. But in a desperation move, this could work. Plus, if you hit 6 heads and add a choice band, then you're actually doing 180 to an active Buzzwole here, which is not quite enough to KO, but it's pretty gosh darn close. Will get a KO1 and a Crozma, interestingly enough. The other thing to remember here is that if you're using a bunch of singers, then Shrine of Punishments becomes a great card. That's the new stadium coming out in Celestial Storm, whereby you put 1 damage counter on each Pokemon EX and GX between turns. So here, you're putting between 0 and 6 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon, and then adding an extra damage counter to each EX or GX while you're at it. It's a very effective way of going about doing things, but it really does need to be its own deck. We talk a lot about Pokemon where, like Xernea's Prism Star the other day, we talked about it as, look, just chuck a copy in every fairy deck because it's a nice attacker and you might want to use it. Meloetta is not a chuck one in your deck, you might use it. This is a build a deck around it kind of Pokemon, because you really do need to have a full bench of singers. Now, the other thing to remember is if you move into Expanded, you can use Skyfield to have 9 Pokemon in play and be even better. But do remember that oftentimes you'll need to use stuff like Tapu Lele, like Oranguru, like the new Zeb Striker. And the problem here is that every one of these Pokemon that isn't a singer that you put on your bench is 1 fewer coin that you're flipping in order to spread damage round to your opponent's Pokemon. We also need to have a quick mention of the attack cost here. It's not the easiest one to meet. Sure, it's a psychic Pokemon, so Malamar's working nicely, but Malamar is another Pokemon to put on your bench that doesn't have an attack called Sing, meaning you don't get to do the extra damage, or at least you don't get to flip the extra coin. Now, what you could do is have a combination of Counter Gain and Counter Energy. Counter Gain lowers the attack cost by 1 colourless energy if you're behind on prizes. Counter Energy is any 2 energy when you're behind on prizes. And if you're trying to spread damage around, you'll often lose a Pokemon or 2 in the early game, which is, you know, it sets you up for these counter cards. The other option is you go into Expanded and use a combination of Skyfield, as we mentioned, and Max Elixir to get the other energy on there. Now, I did mention singers. Obviously, Meloetta alone isn't going to do it. But we got Jigglypuff. The new Jigglypuff from this set does have the attack Sing, which for 2 colourless energy just puts your opponent's Pokemon to sleep. It's not a great attack, you certainly shouldn't use it. Meloetta does the same thing for 1 colourless energy, but it's still there as something just in case, or you can do 10 damage for 1 fairy energy, which isn't great. The one thing I will say about Jigglypuff, it's got 70 HP, which is much better than 60. It means something like a Registeel won't get a one-hit KO, and it means something like, I don't know, 2 Greninjas or a Latios and a Greninja won't get a KO. 70 is a lot better than 60. It does seem like at the moment, especially post-rotation, the only Pokemon in the Sun and Moon block, unless they've been very recently released and I've missed them, that actually have Sing are Jigglypuff and Meloetta. There's a bunch of Pokemon like this Chandelure which have attacks with Singe in the name, so if you search for Sing they'll show up, but unfortunately, not that many Singers around right now. Actually, I'm lying to you, there's a Swablu that has Sing as well. 1 colourless energy puts them to sleep. That gives you 12 Singers, that should be enough to make a deck even when you're using Skyfield. I'm going to be giving Meloetta 3 Wassies, because honestly, I think there is potential here, but I don't think I can honestly say this is ever going to be a great deck. I think there is a little bit of potential here for a fun deck, and I think that sooner or later somebody could make it work. But I really do think the fact that it's flippy and you need Victini, but you need a bench full of Singers, and you need some consistency Pokemon, but you need a bench full of Singers, might just push it out of being a serious deck to contend. But I want to know from you, lovely ladies and gentlemen, so let me know in the comment section, what do you think about this? Do you think it could work? Go nuts, but remember the rule. Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves. Until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.